So in this video, I want to talk about starting with the no self experience. And whether it's the teachings of the Buddha, I wrote No Self, No Problem, and the workbook, they all seem to start off with the illusion of self as a goal. How do I see through this illusion of ego? And in this video, I want to ponder other places to start. So they say that there's an infinite number of paths that all go up the mountain and lead to the same place. So let's try a different path that starts off looking at smaller illusions, illusions that may not be so tied in with the self-illusion, because that's the thing. So if you've ever had, and you have had moments of no self, and these happen all the time, they're really common, except the no self experience doesn't have memory. Memories are to improve the survival of the meat suit and the self. And so memories are all self-related. And so the no self experience, the memory system isn't really tuned in to forming memories of this. And when I was in my early 20s, highly neurotic, and still didn't have money for a car, I'd ride my bike around, and I got a flat. And I remember stopping, and all of a sudden I was changing the tire and entered a state of flow. For a while, there was no me. It was an absolute no self experience. Very peaceful. All of the suffering associated with the self and the abstract world, it was all gone. And once the mind came back online, it started pondering, how do I recreate this experience? In other words, the no self experience had become this spiritual cookie, this reward that the mind sought to find, to replicate, to find a method. Is there any way I can replicate this? Because it was so peaceful. And of course, all along, the mind wasn't really considering that this experience was its absence. So how can the mind recreate some way to make the mind disappear? And of course, that's futile. But the point is that perhaps we could start with smaller, less cookie-like experiences, things like ownership. And when you look at the ownership illusion, it's not really that difficult. In fact, it's kind of remarkable we buy into ownership at all. And so you look at a billionaire and someone who's, quote, homeless, and okay, what's the difference? Well, you can't experience it. There's no conscious experience except for the collective illusion that this one person apparently owns a bunch of stuff and this other person doesn't. And then you can work your way to government, and then all these people with these titles, and they're so impressive, and they all wear suits, and they look important. But in reality, they're just like anyone else. In fact, they need robes and these kind of important looking costumes, or else we would never buy into it. Or you can look at work, a career. Yeah, you go to some building and there's a bunch of people and they're all doing something. But this idea that this corporation exists outside of a bunch of people is a collective illusion. Or maybe just something as simple as time. And you say, well, it's Monday and it's May 12th. And these are obviously social constructions that do not have any existence, and you could prove it. Experience Monday. And you say, oh my goodness, all I've experienced is Monday. No, all you've experienced is the illusion of believing that there's such a thing as Monday. And in that same way, if you can practice these and start seeing how, in a way, simple it is to see through the illusion, eventually the self falls apart along with all the others.